years ago in Belgium, English soccer violence reached a horrifying climax as hooligans turned a football ground into a killing field. 38 people died and over 400 were injured. Mrs. Thatcher said it brought shame and disgrace to the country, and English clubs were banned from Europe. Now, as European football's governing body UEFA considers lifting this ban, we ask whether a cure has been found for the so-called English disease. One of the many cliches about football is that it's a funny old game. To its adherents, and there are perhaps 400,000 people who regularly attend English league matches, it is almost a religion, a fervent faith.
Football's an atmospheric game, it's a passionate game. It's the best game in the world. There's no game like football. You can name any game you want. There's no game touches football. It's a passionate game, and it's about people getting excited. We all have humdrum jobs, or most of us do anyway, and we go to watch our team play and let up a bit of steam. I don't mean punch people, but shout and cheer.
But doesn't one thing lead to another?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Football's been operating for many, many years, with people enjoying themselves, getting excited.
No doubt fans have always got excited, and there's always been some violence at soccer matches. But until recently, football grounds did not resemble maximum security prisons, with rival sets of supporters caged behind bars and segregated from one another by sterile areas. It is said that what hooligans like about football is that they can hide in a crowd. This is no longer the case.
2700 mounted.
2700 mounted, go ahead.
Yeah, just for information, I got a couple of lads from near to the Tacks, Liverpool supporters. They've been hitting the heads with bricks and a bottle at the first aid post, and just for your information, they must have come
with closed-circuit television cameras to monitor crowd behavior, the police can quickly identify troublemakers. Their control room equipment is paid for out of the football pools. Spotting the ball money is being used to spot the hooligan.
Fighting north stand near to the main stand. The assistance required north stand near to the main road stand.
Tighter security has curbed the violence in English football grounds.
I certainly believe that football has done all it can possibly humanly do. There's very little more that we can do without help from outside.
In dealing with its hooligans, the game already receives a lot of help.
So let's go through it. Today is a big game, one of the biggest games that Main Road's had in the recent years. It'll be a gate of 45,000 with 13,000 travelling from Liverpool.
Better policing inside football grounds has merely displaced the problem into the towns. With such a wide area to patrol, Manchester Police had 400 officers on duty for City's cup tie with Liverpool. This was their match of the day.
The similar stage as the cup competition now is here, but in the quarter-final of the Littlewoods Cup, there was a lot of slashings caused in and around the ground by the use of cutthroat razors and the type of things that they use.
Any cans on you? If you've got any cans on you, drink them now. All right.
Football is an enormous drain on police resources. National policing levels indicate the need for one officer for every 75 spectators. 20 years ago, the norm was one policeman for every 1,000 spectators. Most of the police are deployed outside the ground to combat the street corner gangs who defend their territory by bushwhacking visiting supporters. The price of policing football is soaring. This game alone cost £22,000, but Manchester City was only billed for a third of that. Football clubs are not responsible for what happens off their premises, so most of the policing charge has to be borne by the ratepayers.
It's not only the cost to the community of having the police, which is very high, it is the fact that in many areas a wholly disproportionate number of policemen are deployed to look after a game of football, which is a private entertainment for the commercial benefit of the club, and the public, who are not protected because the police are doing something else, really do have a legitimate ground for complaint.
How long can football go on being policed in this way?
I think it's not a question of how long it can go on, it's a question of whether the great British public, and I know they do, wish to follow their national sport. I mean, I don't know whether you've seen the statistics recently about sporting events, but the attendance at football games and matches is well ahead of anything else. I think in the region of over 20 million. There's no other sporting activity as a spectator sport which comes within 18, 19 million of that.
With match attendances going up and violence inside grounds coming down, football is pretty pleased with itself at the moment. Most of the trouble caused by hooligan supporters, the stabbings, muggings and burglaries, now occurs outside the grounds where the government has to deal with it. The enemy within football is now the enemy without, a social problem for which clubs are neither legally nor morally responsible. But with almost 5,000 police officers on duty on a typical match day, and a 74% increase in arrests at First Division games this season, is progress really being made? Some would say not.
I think the police have made significant headway. I think more police, more dogs, more horses, more fences have made significant headway, yeah. Actually, getting to the root of the problem, I don't think it made any headway at all.
If Luton's chairman sees things differently, the Millwall riot helped to shape his views. These were the worst scenes of violence ever witnessed at an English football ground. Millwall fans twice invaded the Luton pitch, fighting a running battle with the police. At the end of it all, 47 people had been injured and extensive damage had been done to the ground. For Luton's board of directors, this was the final straw. They had been counting the cost of hooligan behaviour for far too long.
Grounds smashed up, shops smashed up, people's houses, gardens trampled on, cars vandalised, people living in and around the ground telling me they had to take their car away on a Saturday 2 or 3 miles away because they were frightened of what would happen to it. Roads blocked off, the Arndale Centre at Luton shut on a Saturday afternoon at 4:20, locking 2,000 or 3,000 people inside for an hour.
It was almost like drawing up battle lines every other Saturday and occasionally in midweek as well, and meant that the whole of this county, the normal policing style, was depleted because of one game of football, which involved maybe 8,000 or 9,000 people. And it meant that the town of Luton was almost like a town under siege.
I thought, well, what the hell is going on? So I just tried to apply a bit of common sense to the problem and said, right, everybody that goes into the Luton ground will be a member.
Luton Town is the only major league club to have adopted a members-only scheme. Spectators gain access to the ground through computer-controlled turnstiles. The scanner reads the membership card code and clears its holder for entry. What distinguishes this security system is not who it lets in, but who it keeps out. By excluding visiting supporters, it seems to brand them as being the troublemakers.
With respect, you miss the point. You see, we're not saying that it is the visiting supporter that causes the problem. It is the local home hooligan that causes the problem. Not the one that's interested in coming to the matches, but the one who's just interested in violence. Since we've had the membership scheme, those persons have not joined the club. They don't come to our matches. They're well known locally to the police, and they go about doing other kinds of business these days. They keep away from football. If we'd have still had visiting supporters coming to the club, respectable people, season ticket holders, whatever they were, that would not have detracted our hooligan because he has no respect for whatever you're carrying or whatever you're wearing or whoever you are. The fact that you are a visiting supporter, you will be attacked. And we felt we had to take away that focal point.
Luton believes almost any price is worth paying to be rid of the hooligan scourge, and it certainly cost them dear.
You can't go through then pass it back. Your ticket will allow you to go through. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Luton hoped to replace the missing visiting fans with additional home support.
Okay, bye.
But attendances were down last season and the club lost £250,000. This season they put up their admission prices and attendances fell even further. When Luton took the field for their midweek league fixture with Portsmouth, there were less than 7,000 spectators in the ground. The club needs a crowd of 10,000 to cover its costs. Losing money is a new experience for Luton's chairman. David Evans made millions out of refuse collection and street cleaning before becoming a backbench Conservative MP and a football dignitary.
Let's give it to him.
David Evans is one of football's most controversial figures. He is accused of using the game to advance his own political career. Because Luton's home-only plan is a denial of individual freedom, some clubs' directors have actually refused to come to the ground on a point of principle. Stuff you was the Chelsea chairman's well-publicised comment on the scheme. Another to boycott Luton was the Manchester City chairman.
Oh, I hate it. Horrible. The scab on the face of football, I think. Horrible decision. I mean, they're taking away the freedom of the supporter. They're saying to supporters, you can't watch your team play. They're losing revenue. They're stopping people doing what they want to do.
Your critics would say that by excluding all away fans, you're infringing their civil liberty.
I am. What about the civil liberties of the people whose houses they smash up? What about their civil liberty? People who live in and around the ground. People who are travelling on the train on Saturday afternoon and are terrified by the yobbos running up and down the train. What about their liberty? They're in the majority, you know. 50 million people couldn't care less about football. 4 million could, and 400,000 actually go and watch it. That's all. A tiny minority of the population.
The even tinier minority who come to watch Luton play are not like a normal football crowd. For a start, there are far more women and children. There is no fighting on the terraces, and the crowd actually appears to watch the match. But what has been lost, say football critics, is atmosphere. The game lacks the tension and sense of opposition which visiting supporters supply. According to this theory, the crowd contributes to its own entertainment.
The atmosphere at Luton is not created by two sets of fans chanting filthy songs at each other. In the heyday of football, it was all about home fans. The passion is about the player. It's the player that has to entertain the crowd. It's the players that have to bring out the passion in the crowd. If you go and watch Rod Stewart or Shirley Bassey on stage, they don't have to have Elton John at the other end of the hall to create passion. I mean, they do it by their own ability. Now, the players have forgotten, I haven't learned what atmosphere is. When I used to go and watch Stanley Matthews, people like that, he created the tension and the passion, the expectancy, the mystique. The players now, they spend most of their time cheating, pinching 5 yards up the line for throw-ins, wasting time, fouls off the ball, arguing with every single decision the referee makes, all calling for a throw-in when it's perfectly obvious who kicked it off, and so on. My own team kicking the ball out the ground when there's a minute to go in a cup tie, which they all got a bollocking for, I might add. But nevertheless, it's the players that have let the game down, and when you get a boring game, which is played in offside traps, the crowd get bored, so they look for something else to do. What do they do? They have a fight.
Like the players themselves, most of the spectators are too young to remember the golden age of football. What they have come to appreciate is a game of fierce loyalties and territorial rivalry. And that's what football chooses to give them.
Football's about people going and watching the teams. And any scheme that stops them doing that defeats the whole object. It does away with the rivalry, does away with the competitiveness of the game.
But it also does away with the hooliganism.
Well, I don't think it does.
We haven't had a single case of violence during ordinary league games. There hasn't been an attack on a member of the public. There hasn't been any cases of robbery. There hasn't been an attack on a police officer. Police officers have not been abused. And I just cannot understand for the life of me why police officers, and through their police federation, are prepared week after week to stand there and to be shouted at, to have abuse hurled at them, to be spat upon, and have cans of urine thrown at them, and worse. It just fails, words almost fail me to try and describe it. But the general level of order in Luton over the last 3 years, it's quite a nice place to walk around on a Saturday afternoon. You can do your shopping in peace and without fear of being attacked by anyone, so it's had an enormous effect.
At one time, I mean, we'd look forward to the home games, you know, because it increased trade. But I suppose about 6-7 years ago, we got all these hooligans down here, we got fighting. You know, anything could happen. You never knew your window could be knocked in. But since this all-ticket thing, it's been marvellous.
What has surprised everyone has been the almost total disappearance of Luton's hooligans. Without rival football gangs to fight with, they've gone into hibernation, much to the town's relief. Many of the shopkeepers near Luton's ground are Asian, and as such, they used to be a target for racist football fans. Now, they no longer have to board up their shops on match day.
I mean, I can't say what other clubs say about it, etc., about banning away supporters. But for Luton, it's the best thing that's happened.
And how do you feel about it personally?
For us, it's nearly improved business on a Saturday by 150%. You know,
Really?
It really is that much difference. People are not scared to come out anymore. There's not, you know, the fans from Luton itself have no one to make trouble with.
Even McDonald's noticed the difference. Instead of hiring security guards to stop hooligans stealing hamburgers, they are catering for hungry shoppers who now come into town on Saturdays.
Taking away those 3,000 or 4,000 people who were coming to visit Luton Town has encouraged the shoppers to come back up, and we're actually seeing about 30% increases on trade because the away supporters are no longer here.
McDonald's go in for sponsorship, but keep well clear of football. It has the wrong image for a family-conscious firm. But in Luton's case, they are making an exception. Elsewhere too, the club's efforts have been appreciated.
The member scheme has identified and removed the bully from football at Luton. And it can remove the bully from all other football grounds. And I say to football, whether they like it or not, the next move forward for them is a members scheme. I support them.
To most of the Law and Order party, David Evans is a hero. But to the footballing chairman of Liverpool's Conservative Association, he is merely the peddler of an empty panacea.
Somebody said, is this not the solution to all our problems? I mean, if it were the solution, then 91 other clubs would have taken it up with alacrity. I mean, we are more anxious than anybody else to see that there is no trouble associated with football. And if we felt that was a useful tool to use, then it would have been used. But it hasn't been. And it hasn't been, in the main, because it is felt by the clubs and the police that it would actually be counterproductive.
I'm not so sure that it's my fellow chief constables as much as the chairman and directors of football clubs. Because as far as my fellow chief constables are concerned, the points and advantages and disadvantages of the Luton scheme have been circulated to all chief constables. James Anderton is the chairman of the ACPO subcommittee on football hooliganism, and I know he supports my views. And I know that my views are supported by the Home Office, and they're supported by the Minister for Sport as well.
The Luton scheme is popular with politicians and policemen, but those who sit in soccer's dugouts see it as foul play. The absence of away fans gives Luton an unfair advantage in a game which is all about winning. Football is big business, and clubs can make a fortune out of sponsorship deals and other promotional activities, providing their team succeeds on the pitch. Moved by these commercial pressures, the Football League would only allow Luton to play in its cup competition if the club admitted visiting supporters to its ground.
So far as the League Cup ties are concerned, there is a rule which says we must allocate 25% of our allocation of tickets to the visiting club, subject to the discretion of the management committee. And the management committee wouldn't give that discretion. In other words, they felt that results were far more important than curing hooliganism. We took the opposite view. And we were disappointed by that.
We then get the situation where we have to admit away supporters, at least the club had to admit away supporters because of the rulings of the football authorities. And what do we see? Our first scenes of violence.
Following a series of stabbings at an earlier cup tie, Bedfordshire Police had almost 300 officers on duty for Portsmouth's FA Cup visit. For the comparable league fixture, it had been only 79. Luton's hooligans have been given a new lease of life by the reappearance of away fans. Once again, there is an invading army in town and territory to dispute.
Did you get me in? You'll be put on the next train back to London. He's right, mate. No way you go on the ground, all right? None whatsoever.
No doubt most of those who travel to away games are good supporters, but in this inflammatory situation, they are a potential source of friction. For their own safety, visiting supporters are treated like prisoners of war in a hostile country. They are never allowed to escape from police protection.
There's about eight or nine that I'm with, and they're as good as gold. Good fans who want to go to a ground, watch the football, have a couple of drinks, well, all right, a few more drinks if you like, not get drunk and not cause trouble. But they just want to go and watch the football and enjoy themselves.
To prevent the Portsmouth fans from being ambushed by Luton's hooligans, they are shepherded to the ground. These straggling columns have become a familiar sight in Britain's football towns.
Well, to me, it's absolutely degrading. You have got police officers who meet the supporters at railway stations or coach parks and, in effect, march them through the town. Police dogs are fairly close in attendance. Police horses are also used. They get to the ground, they're segregated, they're caged almost like animals. And it's just a confrontation situation. Which has been brought about well, partially by the police, partially by the clubs, and as a result of violence committed by society.
To remove that violence, Bedfordshire detectives staged a dawn raid on the day of the Portsmouth game and rounded up some of Luton's leading hooligans, the self-styled men in gear.
Well, this morning we arrested 17 altogether. We executed search warrants at each of the houses, and as you can see, the amount of weaponry that we've recovered is quite frightening.
Staggering, isn't it? Between them, the 17 youths possessed an arsenal of more than 60 weapons, including kung fu stars made out of razor blades and magnesium flares which can burn the skin off people's bodies. This is what brings football into disrepute, and precisely what Luton had tried to get away from. Away supporters bring much-needed money to small clubs like Luton, but they also bring trouble into the town. The club's problem is how to survive without them. To do so will require a new commercial strategy.
The vision at Luton is simple. It's going to be a whole day's entertainment. Start 9 o'clock. We're going to have a cinema, we're going to have a nightclub, drinking club after the game. We're going to have a covered stadium. The football's going to be about 10% of the usage of the ground after all, 365 days, only 30 Saturdays that we play football. Another 330 days that the ground will be used. It will become a community centre dominated by local authority, dominated by schools, youth clubs and all other interested parties.
I think football clubs are there actually to produce the product of football for the community in which they reside. And it is very easy, if we're not careful, to actually make football subservient to a multi-purpose sports centre. And under those circumstances, I think that the football club itself, would then lose its role in society.
But what is football's role in society? Those who run the game appear to want it both ways. They are in the entertainment business for private profit, but at the same time they rely on public subsidy in the shape of the police to deal with some of their paying customers. While condemning as mindless morons those who go over the top in the terrorist war, football is a highly commercial game in which the clubs feed off the intense loyalty and commitment of their mainly young male supporters.
It's a connection that's not lost on those who seek to cash in on these territorial instincts. Depending on circumstances, the territory may be as narrow as the neighbourhood or as wide as the country itself. Next month, England plays in the European Championships in Germany, and these T-shirts have been run off to celebrate this patriotic event. You can buy them outside almost any major football ground in England. This one shows a drunken fan with sticking plaster on his face who's obviously spoiling for a fight. On this vest, West Ham supporters are actually encouraged to invade Germany in June, a kind of D-Day for hooligans. And look at this T-shirt, the British Bulldog wearing Luton strip with a spiked dog collar around its neck. The inference is inescapable.
Naturally, English league clubs want to get back into Europe. They can make a lot of money out of its cup competitions. But if they get their wish, they will be travelling on a hope and a prayer. The hope is that they will find football glory. The prayer is that their fans won't let them down.
We've served our time. England is the home of football and belongs in Europe, and I will be bitterly disappointed if we're not allowed back next season.
I think that the efforts made by the police, the local authorities, the FA, ourselves, and everybody concerned, particularly at the sharp end of combating hooliganism, have been such that the efforts themselves have impressed the UEFA committee.
I don't think anything that we've seen in the last 3 or 4 years could lead anyone to be optimistic about the behaviour of British football fans abroad. English football fans, perhaps I ought to say.